right. Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are today. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Kelly Horton. I'm on the marketing team, and I'm joined with Autumn Rexford, who's going to be doing your demo today for real-time cycle counts with the ShipHawk WMS. I want to cover just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Let everyone know the webinar today is being recorded, and we will send an email with a link to review the recording, and normally you'll receive that within about 24 hours after the event. Please chat with us. If you have any questions, use the Q&A box, the Q&A widget at the bottom of your screen. We have resources from our product team on the call today, so if we can't answer your questions as they come in, we've certainly got backup online to help answer those questions. So please feel free to chat with us. And lastly, tell us what you think. At the end of the webinar today, a survey will pop up on your screen with just a couple questions. Please share your feedback. We welcome your feedback on all of our events so we can continue to deliver useful content for you. And I do want to call out one promotion that we're running for those of you using NetSuite or looking to implement NetSuite. We're giving away a free trip to attend SuiteWorld this year. So all you have to do is scan this QR code and fill out a form. We just ask that you set up a 15-minute meeting with one of our fulfillment specialists before July 30th. We will announce the winner on our July 30th webinar. So anyone that fills out the form and is entered to win, we will make sure to send you the details on that event and make sure you're invited so you can all attend, where we'll announce the winner live on July 30th. So before we get started today, I do just want to set the stage for our life cycle of an order series and let you know what we expect to kind of show you throughout the series of webinars. We plan to show you how ShipHawk offers a truly end-to-end fulfillment management solution that doesn't just help automate your operation, because there are plenty of solutions that can do that, but how these solutions were developed to fit your unique business needs and help your company scale. So throughout this series, we'll show you how there are actually two life cycles happening at the same time that we'll cover. One is the actual fulfillment operation in this outer ring, and two is the end customer experience. So you can see the fulfillment operation starts with the receiving items into the warehouse, putting them away, and capturing weights and dimensions, which was the webinar we hosted a couple of weeks ago that Autumn walked through receiving and directed put away and how ShipHawk supports all of these processes. And I'll share the link here in just a minute to the series of webinars. If you'd like to go back and watch any of them on demand and see the ones that are coming up, I'll make sure to drop this in here. So if you'll back up just one second. Sorry, Autumn, I want to run through the rest of the cycle. So the next part, and what we're going to cover today, is the cycle counting inventory as it's sitting in the warehouse. And then throughout the series, we'll cover, when it comes time to go pick, make sure and pack, make sure you're doing that in an efficient manner, and then verifying, what was actually picked and shipping out for your orders. So we'll have webinars so you can see exactly how all of this functionality works. And then a little later on in the series, we'll show you the audit and reconciliation functionality and some analytics to help make sure we're continually helping, to make your distribution centers faster. So that's the fulfillment operation lifecycle. And we also want to show you how we support your whole customer experience. So whether a customer is buying online through an e-commerce store, whether they're buying an EDI order, or whether you're shipping to a retailer, all these different channels are supported with one end-to-end platform. So make sure you check out the upcoming webinar topics, and I will drop that link in here for you. But you've got to be set up for success before the order is ever placed, right? And that's why we covered receiving and put away first, and now we're going to go through the different inventory counts available. So with that being said, I want to launch a quick polling question here just to kind of get everybody thinking and to help us and help Autumn have an idea of what your current workflows look like. So you should be seeing a poll on your screen that asks, how many counts are you currently doing in your warehouse each year? Some of you may not be doing any. Hopefully you're getting at least one in. Maybe you're doing them quarterly, and maybe it's, kind of whenever you have the staff. So let's take a second, and while y'all are filling in that answer, we'll let Autumn so I'll bring Autumn in to kind of talk about, how accurate inventory data is really crucial to running an efficient fulfillment operation. So that's where cycle counting comes into play and the importance of having access to real-time data. Let's just look at these results here. Looks like we've got a good mix. Looks like at least you all are getting one count in per year, which is awesome. A few of you getting a couple. Some of you are doing quarterly, which is great. And a few of you are still, trying to get these in just whenever you have staff available. So it looks like we've got a good mix of folks. So hopefully you'll learn some new methods today that might be able to help you conduct more counts or improve the ones that you're already doing. Oops, I didn't share these on the screen. Now you can see what the results look like. So a good mix here. Okay, so with that being said, Autumn, I want to bring you in here. I know there are actually a number of different counting methods that we offer, and a few key differentiators you're going to cover. So do you want to jump in and tell us more about these?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we'll talk about at first is just kind of all the different ways we have to cycle count, and then we'll deep dive into each of these, right? So we've got a lot of different ways to cycle count in our WMS, and I'll go through these quickly. So one of them is manual cycle counting, which is really just you go decide what bin and what item you want to count. So very operator driven. You can go count an entire aisle, you can do whatever you want. We're not going to be directing you. It's just, hey, I want to count what I want to count. We've also got physical cycle counting, which is a little bit more informative than manual, where you're going to say, well, I want to pick the bin I want to count, but we're going to display some information about what's in that bin, what items we're expecting to see, SKU descriptions and things like that. And you can kind of go through all the items in that bin at one time rather than going in between each item and saying, I'm going to scan this item. Let's count those. Let's count the next item. So we'll see that as well, but just a little bit more information than manual counting. Directed cycle counting is where the system's actually going to direct the operator bin by bin, either according to a plan, previous count results, or filters set. So you'll be able to say, hey, based on this filter, guide me through the warehouse to go count the SKUs I should count right now. We've also got count plans, which are operator or system created plans that can be selected and executed at any time by an operator. So you guys will be able to make count plans in your system. You can create those on the fly, or you can have some that you've already created during implementations, and we'll talk about that a bit more. We've got scan count cycle counting. So rather than just entering a quantity of how many are there, you're actually going to scan all of the items there. So it's kind of like tally scanning. That can be really helpful when you've got a lot of items that look the exact same. And you don't want to have to, fish through those and figure out which is which SKU. You just want to scan everything in the bin. And then we've got interleave cycle counting. This is the most proactive form of counting in our system. This is actually where we're going to prompt the operator to count the item they just picked if that item has gone below a certain threshold. So they're already out there picking. We're just going to say, hey, go ahead and give us a count for that item while you're there. Something I want to point out before we get into each of these different types of counting is that you don't have to shut down your operations to count with ShipHawk WMS. You can count while you have employees going around and picking or shipping orders, because as picks are happening, we're immediately deducting those items from the bin and no longer including them in the expected quantity at that bin. So you don't have to wait until, hey, we finished all of our picks for the day, we fully shipped everything out for the day. You can do it at any time and count in our system. Another thing that I'll preface is that a count is just a count record. Then when it's accepted, it creates an inventory adjustment in your ERP. So we'll talk about the count acceptance process in a bit, but there is an acceptance process. It's not just, hey, if someone goes and counts that there's 300 of this item when there was supposed to be 3, we're not immediately going to send that adjustment to your system. We are going to have that go through an approval process to make sure that you want that adjustment and actually have some second eyes on that if you're looking for it. So first, we're going to talk about interleave cycle counting. And I'm going to jump to the next screen here. So how interleave cycle counting works is you guys get to set a threshold of, hey, when our item gets below a certain quantity, let's say it's 20, we want to go ahead and prompt the operator to count that item, right? They're already picking. So it's during the picking process. They've gone to a bin. We've directed them to the bin. We've directed them to grab the item. They've put that item in their container or their tote that they're picking to. And then we're going to go ahead and alert them and say, hey, the inventory you just completed is at a low status. Go ahead and give us a count for that. This is a blind count. We're not going to tell them how many there should be because we know that's going to make it less accurate. We're also not going to tell them if they're right or wrong and say, hey, give us a second count, because again, we know that's just going to make it a less accurate count. We want to do blind counting here. So as they're picking that, it's going to say, hey, go ahead and give us a count. They're going to very easily count that item. Maybe there's 12 there, and move on through the rest of their picking process. We're going to go ahead and direct them to that next bin. The great thing about interleave cycle counting is you already have a picker on the floor. You don't have to send someone out specifically to do a count. They're already there, and you're catching your inventory count at a very crucial time for that item, which is when it's reaching some low inventory threshold, right? We care about that because if you think there's 20 left and they go ahead and count that and maybe there's only 10, you may need to reorder that item way quicker. You may need to get on that so you don't run out. So it's a really crucial time to count your inventory when you actually have a low quantity. And we're doing it throughout the day in your daily process. Very efficient. You're not having someone go out there extra and count. It's just going on throughout the day. Obviously, all these counting methods are optional. You don't have to use interleave cycle counting, but we definitely recommend it. And it's a really good way to stay on top of items as they're getting to that crucial state, as they're getting to low inventory. So next, we'll talk a little bit about manual cycle counting. I'll jump back here and we'll kind of just show you what this looks like. So manual cycle counting is, again, the most operator directed, right? They're just going to say, I want to go out, I want to pick or I want to count what I want to count. They're going to come into count here. They're going to say, hey, I want to begin manual counting. And they can go ahead and just say, here's the bin I want to count, right? So they can scan a bin and they can go ahead and just scan the item. So they're full control here. We're not directing them. They're just saying, I'm going to go around and count the things that I care about. They can go ahead and put in their count here. Let's say there's 20. They could also count some as damaged if they see damaged ones in the bin at that time, or they can put some on hold if they need to. Let's go ahead and say all 10 are good. We'll go ahead and save that count. And then they just go to the next bin and next ID or next item that they want to count. So fully operator directed. This can be helpful if you just want to tell your operators, hey, go count that entire aisle, go count these things, go look for that, right? If they're just walking around and deciding what they want to count. Another option we have is physical cycle counting. So we'll jump into that now. I'm just going to say begin physical cycle counting. And this one's a little bit different where they're going to scan their bin. And then we're going to tell them what's in that bin, right? So here's the things that we know are supposed to be in there. And they're going to be able to see that there and actually go ahead and count how many are there. And now before this, added an additional item. So if they find an item that's there that isn't in this list, they can actually go ahead and scan that item and say, hey, I have this item. It's going to bring that to their list and they'll be able to say, I found one of these in here, even though that wasn't supposed to be here. So they're not confined to, because we think these 2 items are in here, they can't say there's something else there. They can always say, hey, I found something else, right? So they can actually come in here and do their counts and say, yep, I do have one of these. Yep, I do have 25 of these, or maybe they see actually there's only 24. They can go ahead and say 24 and confirm that and confirm these separate counts here. So we're just giving them a little bit more information in physical cycle counting, such as what items are there, what are the item descriptions, and then we can also show them a quantity here. So it doesn't have to be blind counting, and we can do that elsewhere if you don't want blind counting. If you want to show them quantities, we can do that. So with physical cycle counting, we can do either. We can say, hey, there's supposed to be 25, or we can just say, just count how many of this item are there. And then I would say continue to next bin, and they can go ahead and scan that next bin they want to count. So that's kind of how physical cycle counting works. Again, very much still the operator's decision of what bin they want to count. We're just going to show them more information about what's in it when they go to count. Next, we'll talk about directed cycle counting. And directed cycle counting works based on a couple different filters you can set or count plans. So you can come in here and say, hey, maybe I want to start at a certain bin ID and have you direct me through the rest, or maybe I want to count a specific item. Maybe I want to be directed to count all of my items with low inventory. So maybe if you're not doing interleave, this could be really helpful if you don't want your pickers counting, but you do want to go get those low inventory counts. Or you've got a different threshold you want to go count, right? Lower inventory than your interleave threshold. You can also work off of a count plan, which we'll talk about in a minute. You can look for items with a certain number of recount requests. So I want to go count everything that's had a recount request, or maybe even had a couple recount requests. And you can also filter by the type of count. Is this an initial count? Is it a recount? Is there activity here? And then is it an empty bin, or maybe I want to avoid all my empty bins, right? Maybe you just want to go confirm all of your bins that say they're empty are truly empty. Or maybe you just want to skip all those and not have an operator have to go to an empty bin, right? So you can filter by all these different things here. Let's go ahead and say we want to count everything with low inventory, maybe under 10. I'll put that in and I'll say begin directed counting. And now we're going to actually direct your user to the bin. So we're going to say, hey, go to this bin to count. They're going to scan that bin when they get there. I'm just going to type it in. They would be scanning. Or you can be using an iPad and they could actually just type it in. I'll say continue to next bin. And then we're going to be able to select the items that are here and go ahead and count those. So I'll go ahead and count this item. I would scan that probably and continue count. And let's go ahead and say there's, 8 here, maybe. I'll go ahead and save that count. And again, as always, they can say that things need to be on hold, or they can count items as damaged if they see something that's damaged there. Now we're going to give them an option. We can say, hey, stay at that current bin to count remaining items if there's more items in that bin. Or we'll say, go ahead and travel to your next bin. Here's that next bin we want you to travel to. And they can go ahead and do that. We're going to direct them to that. They can scan the item that's there, continue count, and then put in that quantity. Let's say there's 6 here. A couple other things to note here. You may have seen if I go here, we can also say, again, items not in this list. There's another item there, right? They could scan another item and say, hey, I found this item here. They can also declare the bin as empty, and we're going to enter a 0 count for all the items that we currently have there. They can either choose this or they can scan a barcode that says empty. That's going to go ahead and say, okay, 0 counts across the board for this bin. All right, so that's kind of how directed cycle counting works, where we're actually guiding your user through the warehouse. And now we can talk about cycle counts, or sorry, count plans. So count plans can be created in the system. You can actually come here and say create count plan and decide, how many items in each zone do I want to count? Or we can create these during implementation, or you can have us create them for you through an Excel sheet. So it doesn't have to be zone based. It can be, based on certain items, or maybe I want to go count all my Amazon items or something like that. So we can create some custom count plans for you. And then when you're counting, you can just enter that count plan here. So if I go ahead and say, I've got an A item count plan, I've got an Amazon primary count plan, large freight item count plans. We can create a bunch of different count plans for you and guide the user through what that count plan, contains, what items that count plan dictates that they need to count. Another thing about this is that we can set thresholds for how often you want to recount items. So you can say, hey, for my A movers, maybe I want to recount those every 15 days. And what that means is if you've just counted your A mover item 5 days ago, we're not going to prompt you to recount that when you're doing directed counting. So we're going to wait until that timer's run out and say, hey, now you haven't counted this item within your certain threshold. Go ahead and count that item again now. You can have different thresholds for your different, your A movers, your B movers, your C movers. Maybe you only want to count your B movers every 30 days, right? You don't want to get prompted to go count that all the time. It's not quite as important to you. So you can set thresholds like that that will also take into account. All right, so those are all the different types of counting. And so we're going to jump back to our slides here. In a bit, we're going to take a look at count results and how that works. But we'll jump into another poll, I believe.
Yeah, thanks, Autumn. Okay, so I know that was a lot to go through. Hopefully everybody was able to kind of grasp, how each of these are different. So I wanted to just take a quick poll to see, if anybody was able to, kind of learn about a new counting method that they plan on implementing in their warehouse. Let me find my other poll here. And y'all tell me if you plan on implementing any of these new counting methods at your warehouse. You can select any or several of these. And like I said, in the beginning, it looks like we had some folks that were doing, weren't really currently doing any counting, to some that were doing multiple a year. So hopefully these will, if not give you some new strategies, can kind of help improve some of the processes that you've got in place. So we'll give y'all just a second. It looks like so a lot of good content in here. A lot of people have some new methods they're going to be implementing. Okay, I'll share these results. Everybody can just take a quick look and see kind of what jumps out for everybody and what everybody's looking to implement. And if you do have further questions about any of these counting methods. And if we don't, get to answer all of them today, definitely email us at learnmore@shiphawk.com and we can get you in touch with the right person. I know we've got some customers as well as potential customers on here, so we can get you in touch with your account manager or someone from our team that can make sure you get the answers to all your questions. Okay, and now I know, Autumn, you're going to move on into kind of counting results and accepting counts.
All right, yep, we will jump into that. So as I mentioned before, when you're doing counts, that puts in a count record. That doesn't go ahead and immediately accept that and send it as an adjustment. So there is a count approval process. So we'll take a look at that now. So what I'm going to do is in my count menu, I'm going to go ahead and go to review results. And this is only going to be available to people that you want to be able to do this, right? You probably don't want your floor operators reviewing results. You maybe have your warehouse manager or inventory specialist doing this, okay? So we're going to go say review results. And we can go ahead and filter this if we wanted to. We can also view this on the desktop. We don't have to be viewing it on the handheld. But we can filter this if we want to say, hey, just show me all my results with a specifically high variance or certain bin IDs, certain items. Maybe you're kind of auditing a certain employee's counts and you want to see all of their counts that had variances, items with certain recount requests, or items from a certain count plan. So you can filter this. But I'll go ahead and just say resolve counts and I'll just search it open. So we're going to see everything here that had a variance. So what you're going to see here is all of our counts where there was some kind of variance. And actually, I'm going to jump over to my web page here so you guys can see this a little bit larger and we can see all the information here. Generally, you probably will be doing this from just a desktop. So you can actually see here, not only just the item that was counted, you'll see the type of count that was performed on that. So on demand being, hey, we went to our count menu and completed a count. Interleaved being it was done during picking, we had an interleaved count. And then you'll also see some short picks here. When we short pick something, we're going to automatically enter a count of 0 for that item, because that obviously means we didn't have any left to pick. So you'll see the type of count it was, where it was performed, how many we've got to review here. So right now we've just got 1, but sometimes, maybe an item was counted multiple times, you sent it for recount, you could see the history of that, the status that it was in, how many were expected, how many were counted, and then what was that variance? And also what was the dollar amount of that variance? And you're going to see some large variances here because in our demo environment, we're just kind of scanning random things and entering numbers. So you'll see probably some more variance here than you will in your system, but this is what we've entered. So this is the true results in ours. And we'll be able to say from this, do I want to go ahead and accept that or do I want to send it for recount? We can also view the history here of, hey, when did these counts occur and who did them? And what I'll do is I'll find one that's got, a couple more counts here. This one's got 6, so that's a lot, but I'll show you what that looks like. And we can actually see the total history of those counts. We can see who completed the count, when it happened, and what was the variance at that time. So you can kind of see the patterns here of this count. And this can help you decide, do I want to accept the latest count or does this look pretty crazy? Maybe I want to send it for a recount. So this can kind of help you make that decision as well, especially if there have been multiple counts there. So let's go back to my list. As you accept these, they're going to fall off your list. So you could keep this really clean and accept them really quickly or send for recount as needed. So they will go off your list once you count them. And then another thing I want to show you guys is actually our dashboard. So you have this accept counts, and actually I missed our accept all open counts. That's an option we have as well if you want to go ahead and accept everything that's open right now. We can also take this button out of your system if you don't want anyone to have the ability to do that and you want them to go through individually, make sure they're reviewing each count. Next thing I want to show you is our counting dashboard. So I'm going to go ahead and go to return to search. And I want to show you a dashboard in a different environment that has a little bit more reasonable data than our demo environment where we're kind of doing some funky things. So in our count dashboard, we can see what's going on here. We can see how our counts are doing, by month, by week, by day. How many things are we counting? What's our accuracy? What's our variance there? This just gives us some good data about counting if we're getting more accurate, what's going on there, and can be helpful for anything you guys need. You can also filter by count plans or by different warehouse locations you have to kind of filter your data down to be more helpful to you. Another piece of data that we have from counting is actually our operator information about cycle counts completed by the operator. So I'm going to go back to my homepage here. We're going to go to the administration, and we're going to go ahead and say view operator performance, take action selected. And then we're going to go down to our cycle counts completed. So this can be helpful just to see, what's going on with your different users. Are they all kind of cycle counting throughout the day? Is maybe one person doing a lot more of that? We'll go ahead and refresh that here. And you can kind of see, in our system, it's me and Rob who are doing cycle counts. And you can see, how many we're doing at different times. And this can be a good way to see like, hey, do we have a bunch of different operators doing this? Do we have one person going around doing all the counts? Maybe we want to kind of spread that out a little bit more and get other people doing counts throughout the day. So just more information you have about counting that's going on in your system. So that is pretty much our counting piece. I'll kind of go to our overview just so you guys can kind of look at this while we're moving on, but I'll hand it back to Kelly.
Thanks, Autumn. Yeah, a couple of questions for you. This is a lot of really great information, so hopefully you're all taking notes, or like I said, feel free to submit any questions and we'll try to answer those while we've got the team on the call today. But one question I was going to ask is, what if you're not doing a count, but you need to move something outside of account? Like if something got damaged, can you still track that in the WMS?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got counting, but we've also got, typical moving. We've got adjusting or transferring. So that would be a great use case for a transfer of, hey, we're going to, one of these items we found it got damaged. We want to transfer out a good item, transfer in a damaged item, maybe probably move it to a damaged area. So you can go ahead and do moves, adjustments, transfers on the fly within the warehouse when those things are necessary. Kind of in line with that is replenishments. We can also do system directed replenishments and tell you when things need to be replenished from your back stock or your reserve into your forward area. So we can help you find, hey, go grab these. This needs to be replenished. You're running out of your forward pick location for this item. But yeah, you can always move things and adjust or transfer at any time when needed.
Okay, awesome. And what about, are there any scenarios where a warehouse might be using more than one of these counting methods at a time?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, it is likely that, you guys will probably find what you like best. You may not use all of these. It's probably pretty not typical to use every single option here. You'll find which ones you like, but it is likely that you'd use multiple of them. I'd say it's really common to use interleave, to also use count plans, and to also use, directed counting. Some people also like scan counting for certain items, right? And actually, I realized we didn't talk too much about scan counting. You can actually kind of see it over here. This can be really helpful for some items, but not others. Maybe you've got, t-shirts that are all blue, but they're different sizes, and you don't want to have to figure out, well, how many smalls do I have? How many mediums do I have? You just want to go through and scan all those. We'll actually tally count it as you're scanning. And as you scan each item, say, hey, we're adding one to this item, adding one to this. And so there may be some items or bins where you do want to scan count, and other ones where you don't need to, where it's a lot more obvious the items that are in there. You'd rather just count the quantities and enter the quantities. So yeah, it's very likely you'd use multiple of these, probably not every single one. And we can tailor your count menu to that as well. If you guys, don't want one of these on here, we can kind of take that off, simplify your menu to what you guys actually prefer to use.
Awesome. Okay, I think that covers the questions that I've seen come in.
Yeah. Kelly, let me interject a couple of comments.
Yeah.
So awesome job, Autumn. Couldn't have stated it better myself. But since there was a lot of interest in interleave cycle counting, I can't emphasize this enough. That is a fantastic way to keep your low inventory balances accurate. And Autumn noted, that is when you want it to be accurate. If you only have 2 left in the bin, you want to make sure there's really 2 in that bin, so we don't have a picker going to that bin and ending up having to do a short pick and reconciling and whatnot. And you probably set that threshold down to 1 or 2 or 3, so that the resulting back count in that bin is super fast. You could literally eyeball it and say, oh yeah, there's 3 units there. You wouldn't want to set it to 48 because you don't want that picker spending a whole lot of time spending time counting. You want them to be able to identify it very quickly and say, yes, it's a count. The other thing that may not be obvious, if the count matches, you're done. you counted it. It applies against your KPIs. The dashboard that Autumn showed you had tons and tons of accepted counted. Their inventory accuracy was 98% plus across all months, all sites, which is phenomenal. That's absolutely best in class. And that means 98% of the counts are matching, and you have nothing to do, and you're only reconciling 2%. And as Autumn noted, there are many different methods of counting that are applicable to many different profiles of bins. You count forward pick bins with multiple SKUs in it differently than you pick rack locations with full pallets in it. And so in many cases, we can automatically direct you, but every one of those options is selectable by the operator and driven by your SOPs as to when and how you count. And then there's a question here from Jason about if it doesn't match. And that's very true. If it doesn't match, again, we're not going to lock the bin, we're not going to change it, but it's going to flag as an open count that needs to be resolved. The inventory specialist would review it, and probably if it's only that one count, send it out for a recount. And when we log into counting, one of the options that Autumn showed for filtering is only let me see the recounts. And so you could have another specialist who just specializes in recounts, logs into recounting only, and then runs around the warehouse being directed to each recount that is required. So
Ron,
go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say there's one other question that came in. Mickey asked, can interleaved counting be limited to only primary locations and not used for backstock locations?
At the time, no, but remember, it's only going to fire if the inventory drops below a certain threshold. And if it's a backstock location and it's truly used for replenishment, you would simply be verifying that the bin is empty when it pulls out. It's definitely something we could take under advisement. Haven't seen that or had that reported as a particularly significant problem, but right now it's an all or nothing setting.
Great, thanks. A lot of really powerful tools that we've talked about today. A lot of really great processes that hopefully you all will be able to implement in your warehouse. So please feel free to submit any questions. If you think of anything after the webinar today, you can reach us at learnmore@shiphawk.com. Yeah, there's a slide with the email address up there. And I did quickly want to mention, this is part of our life cycle of an order demo series. So this is the second stop in our life cycle of an order. We've talked about receiving the items into your warehouse. Today, we've talked about counting them, making sure you've got accurate inventory counts. Coming up in a few weeks, we're going to talk about omni-channel shipping. So how you're able to fulfill orders across all channels for any customers that you might be working with or looking to expand to bring on board. And then we're going to dive into the picking process. So we've got really powerful advanced picking methods. So I'll drop the link in here so you all can visit the landing page where you can sign up for any of the upcoming webinars. And just definitely feel free to check back to this link that I just put in the chat. We'll be adding new dates with the additional topics throughout the rest of the summer. So look forward to those. And thanks again for all of you for joining us today. Thanks Autumn and Ron for all the great content. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of your afternoon.